All right, so like I said, when my whole life I was a leftist, I was a communist, and I didn't like my grandpa because I always saw him kind of as a victim blamer, as kind of a right winger. And like one of the reasons why I would say that is because I do remember like one time when I was like in high school, I was with my grandpa, and my grandpa was like there was a Mexican guy, and I was saying how I thought that the Mexicans, there's some people who say that the Mexicans are related to the Israelites, and my grandpa was like, I wouldn't be surprised. They both tend to exhibit, dualistic software. And at the time, I was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? But it seemed to me like it was a little bit of victim blaming right there. And again, I was a leftist, and I wanted race mixing. But now I realize, yeah, I did have dualistic software. I was anti-white and stuff. And, and then there was like another example where I remember though one time, like I was asking my grandpa, like, why do you think that there's more black people who play basketball? And my grandpa was like, well, black people might mature earlier, physically and stuff. And, I thought, but in my mind, I was like, no, because black people are better, and because I wanted race mixing, right? So I was kind of a hypocrite. Like, I wanted to believe that race is a social construction, but I didn't really. And I remember I had a Jewish teacher who taught that race is social construction, but at the same time, he was like, I asked my son one time, and I asked like, what race do you think I am? And my son said brown or black, and you could tell he got like a sense of pride from that, but he kind of wanted to believe that Jews were probably more black, and he wanted to believe that race is social construction, right? Because I think that he probably wanted race mixing too, and he would, but regardless. I think it's because I saw myself as Jewish, and I saw white people as a threat, and I wanted race mixing, But I remember I was more communist, and I was against borders, and I was a leftist. And I remember I didn't like my grandpa because I got the impression that he was more right wing. Because one, he seemed a little more religious, like he believed in Jesus. But he believed that Jesus wasn't God. He believed that everybody's God, right? But he was like, but Jesus could, so that part I liked about it, right? Because I wanted to destroy religion. And especially Christianity, because I associated with white people, and I thought that religion maintained white supremacy. So I liked that aspect of my grandpa, but at the same time, I thought that my grandpa's ideas were still right wing, and he still believed that Jesus could manipulate energy, and he still had these spiritual ideas. Now, what I learned from studying Dr. Hora is Dr. Hora, who was my grandpa's teacher, founded metapsychiatry. He kind of taught that like if you get sick, it's because of your thoughts. Like it's not. He didn't believe in materialistic science, right? So it's because of your thoughts. It's because, my grandpa would say, it's not your thought, it's your software, or because you're not in the flow. So my grandpa's kind of the same way. So my grandpa would be like, yes, if you get cancer, it was because of your thoughts. It was your mentality. And that's what kind of Dr. Hora taught. And I always didn't like that again, because I was always like, that's the victim blaming right winger mentality. I always saw my grandpa as a winner, extoller, and a victim blamer. So like, people who were ahead in life, my grandpa would be like, yeah, it's because they're higher functioning and they have high levels of software. But the people who are struggling, my grandpa would probably think like, yeah, because, they're not in the flow. And that's why they're suffering. And I was always a Marxist communist, and I wanted to overturn that. And I wanted to be like, no, the people who are suffering is because, either because of like accident or, also because, the white, privilege, white privilege, and I wanted race mixing, and I wanted to defeat the Aryans, right? Because I think I saw myself as Jewish, and I saw Aryans as the biggest threat to Jews. But my grandpa always seemed to me to be more of a victim blamer. So, and that's the one aspect. Like, if you get sick, if you have like a bad disease, it's because you weren't in the flow. And now my grandpa would try to be more rational though. He did try to be less new age. He tried to be more rational, and I think because I made fun of him because of that. I don't know how much of it is because he tried to appeal to me. Because remember, I was anti-religion and anti-spirituality because I wanted race mixing, right? And I thought, but and I thought that religion and spirituality maintained white supremacy. And but I don't know how much my grandpa was just trying to appeal to me, but my grandpa would try to tone it down a little bit from Dr. Hora and be like, well, at least, if you're in the flow, then you're going to be open to insight, and and you'll be less likely to get sick, at least because you will be you won't have unprotected sex with prostitutes and stuff because you'll have a higher consciousness, right? So you'll be less likely to get AIDS. So, but also I think that my grandpa did think, well, everything is energy too. Dr. Hora didn't teach us. But my grandpa, this is what my grandpa thought, like everything is energy, everything is one, there is no thing. So, if you're in the flow, you're not going to get sick because everything is energy. And since everything is energy, you cannot get sick if you're one with everything, if you're in the flow. But I always didn't like that because, again, I was like, yeah, he's just a victim blamer. And like, so I'll just give like one example of, I'll get to that later. But so I always kind of saw my grandpa in that way, in that context, as a right-winger victim blamer, and I didn't like him. And I was a communist leftist, and I was always for the victims, right? And I saw the victims more as people of color, and I wanted race mixing. Now, and I look down upon white people, and I look down upon Aryans, especially. So, but at this time, this was like 2014, I became a right-winger again, right? But then, remember, then my grandpa started confusing me again. And I remember like one of my friends, he said like, oh, no wonder Jews are a dying breed, after I wrote a rap, because I couldn't write raps anymore because I wasn't playing basketball and I wasn't nervous because I had a hurt leg. So, and I wanted help from my dad, and my dad wouldn't help me. And I'm going to get more to that later, and how I think that my grandpa really was the one who set up all the conditions, I think, that made things really horrible for me. Like, he's supposed to be a beneficial presence and tried to help me, but he made things horrible. But, maybe I had to go through it because I had to break out of my, anti-white stance. I don't know. But regardless, my grandpa was like, I became a right-winger. But then my friend was like, no wonder Jews are a dying breed, after I wrote the stuff on the rap on his timeline with the cuss words. And then I became anti-white again because he had like a white, he was like a quarter white, and he seemed to be a right-winger. And I thought that, right-wingers tend to be against Jews and stuff. So I became more of a leftist again, and I wanted race mixing again. So, I started to be more like, but my grandpa started confusing me too, because I started studying with my grandpa, and my grandpa was like, that there is no such thing. Like, I asked him, what do you think about Caitlyn Jenner? And my grandpa was like, well, there's no such thing as gender. And there is no such thing as a man or a woman. In the Bible, it says, in Christ, there is no male or female, Jew or Greek. And you see, this is the type of stuff that would confuse me, because I always thought that he was a right-winger because he was like always a victim blamer. But then he would be like saying this left wing, what I thought was left-wing type stuff, like, oh, there is no gender, or oh, there is no race, there is no such thing as Jew nor Greek, there is no black or white. My grandpa would say stuff like that. Now, so I'm like, so you're saying it's a social construction? Like, I was confused, but my grandpa's like, no, well, there is no Jew nor Greek or black or white or, or male nor female or homosexual or heterosexual. Everything is, but this is not what Dr. Hora taught. My grandpa be like, everything is energy. There is no Jew nor Greek. Everything is energy, and everything is one. So I would be like, he just confused me. So then I was like, so are you a right-winger or a left-winger? Like, you just confuse the shit out of me, dude. And now I understand it, because at the time, he didn't teach me what the flow was. I was confused. He just confused me. But now I understand what he's trying to say. Like, when you're in the flow, you lose yourself, and, the ego, it distorts things, and the self distorts things, and it makes things worse, and you try to make things happen, you make things worse. But if you're in the flow, you're one with everything, and you're not exhibiting self-confirmatory behavior. So there is no, and everything is one, everything is energy. So there is no, Jew nor Greek or male nor female and stuff. But my grandpa, he would later teach me, and I understand it now, but at the time I was just confused. He would teach me like, okay, like he would say like, Caitlyn Jenner, he wants to be a girl. He says he's making a step in the right direction because he knows that he's not a man. He knows that he is energy. My grandpa would say, or later he would say consciousness or whatever, but that was after I tried to explain to him about consciousness. But this time he thought everything was energy. He's like, he knows he's not a male. So he's making the right direction, saying that he's a female, but that's also a category, and that's also an identity, an ego identity. But really, he is neither. He is energy. So my grandpa's trying to point to transcending the self to the flow and everything. Now I understand it, but at the time I was confused. So I thought, like, is my grandpa saying everything's a social construction, or, he's just confusing me. So I went back to being a leftist again. But at the same time, like, I was still upset with my grandpa, because my grandpa was like, he was a victim blamer. Like, he was still victim blaming me, and I was against I was confused. He confused me. But then also remember, when I was a right winger, I was into Islam. Like, I was into Islam, and I thought that, like, punishing women for promiscuity would be helpful for society and stuff. And my grandpa would even say, like, there is no formula. It could be helpful, because my grandpa would say promiscuity is not existentially valid. And that was another reason why I thought he was a right-winger, because usually right wingers are against promiscuity. But then my grandpa started telling me, like, I was saying to my grandpa how I like the Quran. I like how the Quran has women, covering themselves, and how the Quran teaches these types of things and stoning women who are, adulterers and stuff like that. But then my grandpa was like, that's not really what the Quran taught. My grandpa was, and then I started looking up the liberal theories about the Quran, saying, like, alcohol is okay, and women, the Quran was pointing people, it was actually more liberal for its time, and it was bringing people toward more liberalism. Now, my grandpa would say it's not liberalism, but it's pointing people toward the flow, which is, like, my grandpa would say, inquiry and insight, and not self-confirmatory. And my grandpa would say that promiscuity is self-confirmatory, but also he would also say non-promiscuity could be self-confirmatory because you could be doing it to show off and stuff like that, and so either one could be self-confirmatory and not the flow. But at the time, like I said, I didn't understand all that stuff. But so he was confusing me. So I was like, well, is my grandpa liberal? I was like, I don't know, I don't know what's going on. But anyways, I moved from being right wing again to becoming liberal. But as I described, I had a hurt leg at this time, and I wanted help with my leg, and my grandpa was not helping me. So I'll get to that more a little bit in this next lecture.